Good morning, fifth grade. We're going to continue reading in our novel, Esperanza Rising. And we're going to be reading chapter 6. Hang on, I was on chapter 5. Here we go. This is what your notes look like. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, how does Esperanza feel about moving to California? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, how is life in the United States similar and different from life in Mexico? And the standard that we're going to be working with is comparing and contrasting two settings in the novel and analyzing the extended metaphor. So we have been comparing and contrasting characters, but today we're going to compare and contrast the setting. Our vocabulary words are perspiration, and that is when you're sweating because you're hot. Wilted, that's usually is talking about plants, but it could be talking about a person when they're like drimp or they're limp, or they droop because they have, because of the heat. And then barren, that's when there isn't any life. It's like a desert. Go ahead and turn the page in your notes, and we're going to be using our CSPS strategy as we're reading chapter 6. So turn to page 81, and we're at the chapter entitled Los Melones, or Cantaloupes. Let's begin reading. They reached the border at Mexicali in the morning. Finally, the train stopped moving and everyone disembarked. The land was dry and the panorama was barren except for date palms, cactus, and an occasional squirrel or roadrunner. The conductors herded everyone into a building where they stood in long lines waiting to pass through immigration. Esperanza noticed that the people in the first cars were escorted to the shortest lines and passed through quickly. Inside, the air was stagnant and thick with the smell of body odor. Esperanza and Mama, their faces shiny with grime and perspiration, looked tired and wilted as they slumped with even the slight weight of their valises. The closer Esperanza got to the front, the more nervous she became. She looked at her papers and hoped they were in order. So we'll stop right there because we have information about the setting and the character. For the character in box 1, we know that Esperanza and everyone who's traveling with her, they are getting off the train and they're going through customs, which is what you have to do when you're immigrating to a new country. You have to check in with that country. They have to check all your paperwork and make sure that you have everything in order. And we know that Esperanza is really nervous about this. Our text tells us that she gets nervous the closer that she gets to the front. And so in box 1, we would write Esperanza, Mama, Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel get off the train and go through customs to enter the United States. And Esperanza is nervous. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. We would write down this quote in the last paragraph on page 81. Esperanza and Mama, their faces shiny with grime and perspiration, looked tired and wilted as they slumped with even the slight weight of their valises. Press pause to write down the quote and play when you're ready for the setting. And our text tells us that they're at the border of Mexicali, which is the border of Mexico and California. And they're getting off the train to go through customs. It tells us the land is dry and barren. There's not really anything around them. And so in box 2, we would write, they have reached the border of Mexico, and everyone has to get off the train to go through customs. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And we would write down this first sentence that says they reached the border at Mexicali in the morning. Finally, the train stopped moving and everyone disembarked. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. Go ahead and turn the page, and we're looking out for the problem. What if the officials found something wrong? Would they send her back to her uncle's? Would they arrest her and put her in jail? She reached the desk and handed over the documents. The immigration official seemed angry for no reason. "Where are you coming from?" She looked at Mama, who was behind her. "We are from Aguascalientes," said Mama, stepping forward. "And what is your purpose for entering the United States?" Esperanza was afraid to speak. What if she said the wrong thing? "To work," said Mama, handing him her documents as well. "What work?" demanded the man. Mama's demeanor changed. She stood up straight and tall and deliberately blotted her face with a handkerchief. She looked directly into the official's eyes and spoke calmly, as if she were giving simple directions to a servant. "I am sure you can see that everything is in order. The name of the employer is written there. People are expecting us." The man studied Mama. He looked at their faces, then the pages, then their faces again. Standing tall and proud, Mama never took her eyes from his face. Why was it taking so long? Finally, he grabbed the stamp and pounded each page with the words "Mexican National." He shoved their papers at them and waved them through. Mama took Esperanza's hand and hurried her toward another train. They boarded and waited an hour for all the passengers to get through immigration. Esperanza looked out the window. Across the tracks, several groups of people were being prodded into another train headed back to Mexico. "My heart aches for those people. They came all this way just to be sent back," said Mama. "But why?" asked Esperanza. "For many reasons. They had no papers, false ones, or no proof of work. Or there might have been a problem with just one member of the family, so they all chose to go back instead of being separated." Esperanza thought about being separated from Mama and gratefully took her hand and squeezed it. Almost everyone had boarded except Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel. Esperanza kept looking for them, and she became more anxious with each passing minute. "Mama, where are they?" Mama said nothing, but Esperanza could see worry in her eyes too. Finally, Hortensia got on. The train engines began to chug. Her voice tense, Esperanza said, "What happened to Alfonso and Miguel?" Hortensia pointed out the window. "They had to find some water." Alfonso was running towards the train with Miguel close behind, waving the secret package and grinning. The train slowly started moving as they hopped on. Esperanza wanted to be angry at them for making her anxious. She wanted to yell at them for waiting until the very last minute just so they could find some water for their package that was probably nonsense anyways. But looking from one to the other, she sat back, limp with relief, happy to have them all together surrounding her, and surprised that she could be so glad to be back on the train. We'll stop right there because we have our problem and our solution. One of the problems that Esperanza faces on page 84 is that she's worried that Miguel and Alfonso didn't make it past the border security and that they were being turned back. She was nervous about her own papers and they had a little bit of trouble, and then she saw the people getting into the other line to go back to Mexico, and then she couldn't find, Miguel, Hortensia, and Alfonso, so she got worried. In box 3, we would write, Esperanza is worried that Miguel and Alfonso did not make it past border security, and they would be turned back. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this last sentence on page 84. Esperanza wanted to be angry at them for making her anxious. Press pause to write down your sentence and play when you're ready for the solution. And we know that once they get back on the train, she's relieved to be on the train, and she's relieved that they all made it past security. So in box 4, we would write down, Esperanza is relieved that everyone is back on the train on their way to the United States, which surprises her. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And we could write down this last sentence before the page break that says, but looking from one to the other, she sat back, limp with relief, happy to have them all together surrounding her, and surprised that she could be so glad to be back on the train. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, how was Esperanza's perspective changed since the beginning of her journey? And so you really need to zoom in on this part on page 85 where she's surprised that she's relieved to be back on the train, and you need to talk about how the experience with immigration has changed her perspective.